All Day September by Roger Kuykendall. Read by Bologna Times. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. All Day September. Quote, "Some men just haven't got a good sense. They just can't seem to learn the most fundamental things, like when there's no use trying, when it's time to give up because it's hopeless." Unquote. The meteor, a pebble, a little larger than a match head, traveled through space and time since it came into being. The light from the star that died when the meteor was created fell on Earth before the first lungfish ventured from the sea. In its last instant, the meteor fell on the moon. It was impeded by Evans' tractor. It drilled a small, neat hole through the casing of the steam turbine and volatilized upon striking the blades. Portions of the turbine also volatilized. Idling at 8,000 rpm, it became unstable. The shaft tried to tie itself into a knot, and the blades, damaged and undamaged, were spit through the casing. The turbine again reached a stable state, that is, stopped, permanently stopped. It was 2 days to sunrise where Evans stood. It was just before sunset on a spring evening in September in Sydney. The shadow line between day and night could be seen from the moon to be drifting across Australia. Evans, who had no watch, thought of the time as a quarter after Australia. Evans was a prospector, and like all prospectors, a sort of jackknife geologist, selenologist, rather. His tractor and equipment cost $250,000. $50,000 was paid for. The rest was promissory notes and grubstake shares. When he was broke, which was usually, he used his tractor to haul uranium ore and metallic sodium from the mines at Potter's Dyke to Williamson Town, where the rockets landed. When he was flush, he would prospect for a couple of weeks. Once he followed a stampede to Yellow Crater, where he thought for a while that he had a fortune in chromium. The chromite petered out in a month and a half, and he was lucky to break even. Evans was about 300 miles east of Williamson Town, the site of the first landing on the moon. Evans was due back at Williamson Town at about sunset, that is, in about 16 days. When he saw the wrecked turbine, he knew that he wouldn't make it. By careful rationing, he could probably stretch his food out to more than a month. His drinking water, kept separate from the water in the reactor, might conceivably last just as long, but his oxygen was too carefully measured. There was a 4-day reserve. By diligent conservation, he might make it last an extra day. 4 days reserve, plus 1 is 5, plus 16 days normal supply equals 21 days to live. In 17 days he might be missed, but in 17 days it would be dark again, and the search for him, if it ever began, could not begin for 13 more days. At the earliest it would be 8 days too late. "Well, man, 'tis a fine spot you're in now," he told himself. "Let's find out how bad it is indeed," he answered. He reached for the light switch and tried to turn it on. The switch was already in the "on" position. "Batteries must be dead," he told himself. "What batteries?" he asked. "There are no batteries in here. The power comes from the generator." "Why isn't the generator working, man?" he asked. He thought this one out carefully. The generator was not turned by the main turbine, but by a small reciprocating engine. The steam, however, came from the same boiler, and the boiler, of course, had emptied itself through the hole in the turbine, and the condenser, of course— "The condenser!" he shouted. He fumbled for a while until he found a small flashlight. By the light of this, he reinspected the steam system and found about 3 gallons of water frozen in the condenser. The condenser, like all condensers, was a device to convert steam into water so that it could be reused in the boiler. This one had a tank and coils of tubing in the center of a curved reflector that was positioned to radiate the heat of the steam into the cold darkness of space. When the meteor pierced the turbine, the water in the condenser began to boil. This boiling lowered the temperature, and the condenser demonstrated its efficiency by quickly freezing the water in the tank. Evans sealed the turbine from the rest of the steam system by closing the shut-off valves. If there was any water in the boiler, it would operate the engine that drove the generator. The water would condense in the condenser, and, with a little luck, melt the ice in there. Then, if the pump wasn't blocked by ice, it would return the water to the boiler. But there was no water in the boiler. Carefully he poured a cup of his drinking water into a pipe that led to the boiler, and resealed the pipe. He pulled on a knob marked "Nuclear Start, Safety Bypass." The water that he had poured into the boiler quickly turned into steam, and the steam turned the generator briefly. Evans watched the lights flicker and go out, and he guessed what the trouble was. "The water, man," he said. "There is not enough to melt the ice in the condenser." He opened the pipe again, and poured nearly a half-gallon of water into the boiler. It was 3 days' supply of water, if it had been carefully used. It was 1 day's supply, if used wastefully. It was ostentatious luxury for a man with a month's supply of water and 21 days to live. The generator started again, and the lights came on. They flickered as the boiler pressure began to fail, but the steam had melted some of the ice in the condenser, and the water pump began to function. "Well, man," he breathed, "there's a light to die by." The sun rose on Williamson Town at about the same time it rose on Evans. It was an incredibly brilliant disk in a black sky. The stars next to the sun shone as brightly as though there were no sun. They might have appeared to waver slightly if they were behind outflung corona flares. If they did, no one noticed. No one looked toward the sun without dark filters. When Director McElroy came into his office, he found it lighted by the rising sun. The light was a hot, brilliant white that seemed to pierce the darkest shadows of the room. He moved to the round window, screening his eyes from the light, and adjusted the Polaroid shade to maximum density. The sun became an angry red-brown, and the room was dark again. McElroy decreased the density again until the room was comfortably lighted. The room felt stuffy, so he decided to leave the door to the inner office open. He felt a little guilty about this because he had ordered that all doors in the survey building should remain closed, except when someone was passing through them. This was to allow the air conditioning system to function properly and to prevent air loss in case of the highly improbable meteor damage. McElroy thought that, on the whole, he was disobeying his own orders no more flagrantly than anyone else in the survey. McElroy had no illusions about his ability to lead men. Or rather, he did have one illusion. He thought that he was completely unfit as a leader. It was true that his strictest orders were disobeyed with cheerful contempt. But it was also true his mildest requests were complied with eagerly and smoothly. Everyone in the survey, except McElroy, realized this, and even he accepted this without thinking about it. He had fallen into the habit of suggesting mildly anything that he wanted done, and writing orders he didn't particularly care to have obeyed. For example, because of an order of his stating that there would be no alcoholic beverages within the survey building, the entire survey was assured of a constant supply of homemade but passably good liquor. Even McElroy enjoyed the surreptitious drinking.